Vicenzo Scamozzi. I have difficulties. I have difficulties to memorize his name. Maybe because of the first four letters of his family name, Scam, and I don't know. But maybe the more I contemplate his work, the maybe the more his name will remain with me. So when Palladio died, he was 28 years old. And as I said, upon Palladio's death, Scamozzi took over some of his unfinished works, very important works, Villa Capra, Teatro Olimpico, and San Giorgio Maggiore. But let's look first at the man who is considered the most important architect in Venice after Palladio and before Baldassare Longhena, who was his pupil. I don't know if he studied with Palladio. Some call him the pupil of Palladio. I don't know if he studied with Palladio, but Palladio had a great influence on him. And then Longhena, the great Baroque Venetian architect, became his pupil. It's a little difficult sometimes to know the authorship of a building, because I found at least two or three buildings, important buildings, where it is not very clear if the author was him or Longhena. Anyway, he published a very important book on architecture that unfortunately a few months before he died, and something that if he lived longer, he would have his activity would have benefited greatly from his theoretical work. Well, you saw before an engraving of him, and now you see a sculpture of him. Now we go not at first, not chronologically. Two or three buildings I show because I started with the important works, and then I changed my mind and I took it one step at a time. Sorry about the two systems. Villa di Rocca Pisani, which is almost Palladian, but it's not Palladian. But you can tell the influence of Palladio. And even in the way he made the drawings, illustrating his architecture, there is a relationship between the four books on architecture that Palladio produced and what Scamozzi did. You see here all kinds of complexities at work, and it appears to be a square, but it's more than a square. And I mean, it is a square, but you see that all those diagonals betray relationships that they certainly have complexity. We'll arrive at this building. You'll see it. Built. Yeah, it's a fine building. It's not Villa Rotonda, it's not Villa Capra, but it's a good building. And it's good both outside and inside. The interior is surprisingly modern in a way, I mean, the absence of ornaments is amazing for that time. Pitcower, the great critic of architecture, theoretician, said that he was the intellectual force behind the appearance of, or the birth of neoclassicism. But between his time, Renaissance, late Renaissance, and neoclassicism, there was, of course, at least the Baroque. There was the Mannerism, and there was the Baroque, and then neoclassicism. So he anticipated maybe neoclassicism, but stepping over what was represented by his pupil Longhena, that is Baroque. Villa Molin at Mandria near Padua. First the drawing, very symmetrical, but not perfectly symmetrical, but very symmetrical. So this kind of world, which is so stable, is so very different from our world. Although, of course, there are buildings built like this, but not by architects of renown, really. Today, I'm talking about today. Now, this is a building in Venice of the three long buildings that surround Piazza San Marco in Venice. One is by him, is this one, although I had great difficulties to identify it because although there are only three buildings, but on the web, I found this information saying that the one facing north is by him. In other places, I found that the information that the one facing south is by him. In the end, I decided, just because I thought his more sober way of designing is closer to this one on the north side of the San Marco Plaza. And the one across the plaza is by Longhena. We'll arrive at this in more detail. Another villa, I think this was his earliest work, from 1568. Very, say Palladian in a way. He was very young when he built this. Apparently, he also built two stables at Villa Rotonda, but I couldn't find pictures of them. Then Palazzo Tiene in Vicenza, reworked on a previous project by Palladio. This building is just like this these days. In fact, it's not far away from the train station. So it was designed by Palladio, but then he built it, Scamozzi, and I guess he made some changes. So it's a hybrid work between Palladio and Scamozzi. And if you go on this street here, is lined up with buildings by Palladio. Anyway, we saw some of them in the previous presentation. This is from the courtyard. And this is the plan with a entrance at the top. No, the other way. It's at the bottom, and at the top is the courtyard. The parking also. Kenneth Frampton thinks that the car destroyed the city and destroyed architecture. Maybe he's right. Although there are probably other causes, not just the car, but the car changed many things, it's true. Another villa, early villa in Vicenza by him. Then Palazzo Caldogno from 1575. So he was, I think, 23 years old. Very young. I didn't find pictures with it though. Then this one, an important work by him, and we saw it before. He was, between 24 and 26, or 27, maybe 23 and 26. Very young. We saw it, and it's one of his masterpieces, but he was very young. Almost the age of a student now. He built a lot, actually, And today I was afraid I wouldn't be able to go through all his works. So when you think about it, a man around 25 built this work. Yes, there is a certain influence from Palladio, but it's different from Palladio. Palladio didn't use that cupola, that dome, very frequently. Plus, there is a difference between Villa La Rotonda or Capra, and this building. This one is smaller, yes. Now, the Trissino Palace in Vicenza, where he worked with Gian Domenico Scamozzi, maybe a relative. So Palladio died in 1580. So Scamozzi, when he built this palace in Vicenza, he was 27. In 79, he was 27. In 76, he was. I have to count down backwards, and I'm afraid I'm bad at arithmetics now. 3 years younger, so 27, 24. Again, very, very young, and having major commissions in Vicenza, which was dominated by Palladio. I don't know how he was able at such a young age to receive such commissions. So this is also in Vicenza, that city dominated by Palladio. Dominated by Palladio, but Scamozzi and others are present there too. So here he was. This was the year when Palladio died, and I don't know if I have a picture with this one. He was 28. Now I didn't. Now Villa Nani Mocenigo is a good building by him. So he built it between being 28 and 32. But unfortunately, with this building, is presented as being built by him, but apparently there are voices saying that it might have been built by Longhena, his pupil. I don't know. They cannot make up their minds. Longhena is more Baroque, but this building has a few Baroque ornaments. Otherwise, the building could very well be by Scamozzi. I don't know, and it seems there is discussion about this. Is it Scamozzi or is it Longhena? Maybe both. I don't know. Longhena, Baltasare Longhena was his pupil, the only one he had. Interesting, those two stairs there, the functionalists would say it's a loss of money and material and so on, and not just the functionalist, of course. But it's interesting now to have. You would expect one stair would be enough, but it looks kind of better with 2 stairs. Although it's not just about looks. Okay, now Villa Capra, which the famous La Rotonda. I only have 2 pictures here. So he added the stables, but I couldn't find pictures of them. But it seems he worked for 12 years, since the death of Palladio to 1592. I don't know what he did there. For 12 years, he probably had other works too that he was doing simultaneously. And it's too bad I couldn't find them. When I visited La Rotonda, I don't remember seeing stables. Anyway, apparently it was completed in 1620, so 28 years after he stopped working for La Rotonda, other people kept working on La Rotonda. I didn't know actually that this very, very famous building by Palladio, which Goethe thought was the perfect house or human dwelling uh, ever built, was actually completed after the death of Palladio. You know, people kept working on it for 40 years after Palladio died. This I didn't know. I learned now preparing this presentation on Scamozzi. This is how you see the main entrance as you enter the, you know, the courtyard or the, you know, the property, which is a large one. This is what you see. And this is what you see when you look from the building, from one side, actually, not towards the entrance. This impressed Goethe very much, as I said, because he felt that this building is perfectly connected with everything, with itself, with the immediate surroundings, with cosmos. And he might have been right. Now, Church of San Gaetano Fieve in Padua, again, young. He was 29, from 29 to 34. The interior is impressive and kind of unique. I never saw a church like this. It's very interesting, I think. Can you imagine a young man, you know, 29, 30, whatever, he built this church. And this is not the only building he built around that age. So it is said that in architecture there is no precocity. Well, it seems we are contradicted here. In the present, because of the new technologies, there are young architects who are able to assert themselves because the very young ones are more fluent with the newest technologies. But it seems that even during the late Renaissance, you know, a young architect, if he had talent and the necessary connections, would be able to build. Unlike Louis Kahn, who, you know, in a way, began at 55 with Trenton bathrooms and then with Richard's laboratories. And these are not unimportant works, like this church. Now, the building that we saw before, it's incredible that the San Marco, the piazza is surrounded by three buildings meant to be occupied and used by the lawyers, no, by the procurators, or I don't know if there is such a word in English. I'm not sure actually about this building, but these two, one is the I don't know, Procurazie Nuove, and the other one is, you see, continued the different interior by Francesco and completed in 1663 by Longhena. From what I read is that Longhena did this one, and this one is done by Scamozzi, but I also found information that is the other way around. I think this is by Scamozzi because it's more classical, and this one is a more agitated the facade, so you could say a little bit more Baroque in a certain way. So I could be wrong, but I think this is by Scamozzi and this one is by Longhena. But it seems Longhena also worked on this one in the interior from what I read before. Anyway, so yeah, this one I think is by Scamozzi. And it continues the library that was built by Sansovino. And in fact, he himself, Scamozzi, did some work in the famous library by Sansovino, which Palladio thought was the most rich and the most decorated building from antiquity until his time. So meaning in 1,500 years, an incredible compliment coming from an incredible architect, that is Andrea Palladio. But this is the procuratio, I don't know. I have difficulties to pronounce this word, and I apologize. Is by Scamozzi. So essentially, in this in San Marcos Plaza, you have a building by Longhena and a building by Scamozzi vis-a-vis each other. And I don't know the third one who was built by who. Now, Palazzo Cividale, he was 30 years old when he built it. It's attributed to him, but unfortunately I don't have pictures. The Library of San Marco, which was is considered almost completely the work of Jacopo Sansovino, but he did some work there. It's not very clear to me where. This building was very, very highly considered appreciated by Palladio. As I said, and you see here on the right, beginning the work of Scamozzi that we just saw before. So this is Sansovino, and this one is Scamozzi. But it seems Scamozzi did some work also here in this so much applauded building by Palladio, built by Sansovino. Then Teatro Olimpico, the famous work by Palladio, but it seems at least for a year, Scamozzi worked on the Teatro Olimpico, remodeling of the structure. I guess he did a wooden scene. I don't know, maybe he did some other things. But he worked only for a year for the Teatro Olimpico. And this is a very interesting work by Palladio, because he's obviously an anti-classicist here, and a mannerist and a surrealist even. We'll talk more about it on the 19th of August. So this was by Palladio, but some work by Scamozzi was done here. I don't know if it was just the wooden stage. I don't know. That's what I read, but one thing I also read was that Scamozzi became very interested in the theater and stage design, and you will see, in fact, the theater built by him. So having nothing to do with Palladio, which is a very, very good work. You'll see it very soon. And not in Vicenza, not in Venice, but very fine work. But what we see here is Teatro Olimpico by Palladio. Then the Library of San Marco, he did the vestibule from 1587, 1596. It was hard for me to find pictures of this vestibule, so I didn't want to put a picture that I was not convinced was with that vestibule. But as I said before, the building itself was built by Sansovino. Then Villa Cornaro from 1588. It was reconstructed. I couldn't find great pictures with it. I found one, but there are confusing, or I don't know. I'm not really an expert in Scamozzi. I just try to not forget him and to incite other people to if they are interested in this subject, to do further study. But from what I read, it's sometimes it's difficult to know for sure who built what, because there are various authors. Some buildings are even, some things that were done by Palladio, other things were done by Scamozzi. Others that think that was done for a while by Palladio, then continued by Scamozzi, is hard. Now, this theater was built by him, and this is a very, very good work. And I would say it's different from Teatro Olimpico. Unfortunately, this drawing is hard to read. I couldn't find a better resolution. But you can see the building, approximately well, and it's interesting, and it's I think it's a very good piece of work. It's smaller than the Teatro Olimpico. But just try to imagine that we remove the sculptures, we remove the frescoes, and we get the modern work. We are so obsessed with space, but we reduced architecture to space, and I think it's not enough. Space is not enough. It doesn't matter how interesting so-called the space is. You need something else to animate the all the elements that contribute to the building. Okay, another villa revised in construction near Padua. I imagine it's just that court, that segment in the middle. Very opulent interior. I would say this is already Baroque. This is not neoclassical at all. Now, an interesting church in Venice from 1590 to 1595. It's a short time. They built the church in 5 years. Um, it's not a very big church, but is a fine building. And this one, yes, you could say some kind of classicism or neoclassicism, or it's outside. Inside is a different story. It's more like a temple, when you look at it. So there is the artwork was done after his death. Um, Apparently, the construction was completed in 5 years, but then the decorations took much longer. I don't know what this is. I searched for exactly this information, statuary of Venice Republic. I couldn't find any image, any other information. I'm sorry. Uh, this one, sorry, this one we already saw. I don't know. It's a mistake here. This is still. No, it's not this church. It's a building that we saw before. I'm sorry. Something happened here. Yes, this is this church, Chiesa il Convento, and the monastery of San Gaetano in Padova, with an unusual facade, very different
Dan,
from the other one. This one,
Dan,
yes.
can I ask a question here? If you go back a slide or two to that ceiling of that church. No, not this one. The one you showed right now. No, not this one. Yeah, this ceiling. Is it a false ceiling or is it a real roof in that shape?
No, it's not. It's not false. It's real, I think. I mean, I don't
Because
have a section, but what makes you think that it might be false?
uh, there are some churches in Goa here in India. They have a roof above, which is a kind of lean-to roof, it's a sloping roof, and inside they make this kind of a structure in plaster of Paris. Those churches are also, I think, 300 years old or something. Because the structure of this would be quite difficult. I mean, they would need to buttress all those the lines that you see and build that roof. I don't know if they had that technology. Uh, I don't know.
I have to look for drawings. I don't have in this presentation for
Right.
sections, but
No problem.
I imagine is the roof. Now, Villa, this one was attributed to him, very Palladian, um, hard to tell. Another villa in Padua, and the chapel. They are one next to each other. This is the villa, and this is the chapel, and they are together. Kind of different from the previous works that we saw by him. Now another palace in Vicenza. I mean, there are so many that you get dizzy, you just don't know any longer. Is it Palladio? Is it Scamozzi? Is it Longhena? One near the other, one near the other. Well, this is a governmental building, I imagine. I mean, I see it. The flags seem to say that it's a public building of some importance. Palazzo Trissino, so built in 1592, so he was 40 years old, Scamozzi. And you can see the influence of Palladio, of course, but maybe Palladio himself was influenced himself, maybe not just from the Roman Forum, but from local traditions. I don't know, but you can see a continuity here, between Palladio and Scamozzi, even in the treatment of the pavement. Villa Valerio Bardellini, I like his drawings, as I like the drawings of Palladio in the four libri, the four books of architecture. And I like the fact that they didn't use renderings. They didn't have, all the spectacle that we are capable of creating these days. They didn't use perspective. And, perspective was invented at least 150 years before Scamozzi. And I wonder why. They were content with Euclidean geometry. Uh, Now, the information I took is that apparently there is a building in the United States in Connecticut, in Hartford, that is similar to this Villa Ferretti. The name derives from the client, from the people who commissioned the building. A large building. It's more like a palace. And yes, here you can say there is some kind of announcement of neoclassicism. But I also see Renaissance here. It's not really neoclassicism. but the rhythm and the regularity and the simplicity, yes, could make one assess that maybe it's some kind of anticipation of neoclassicism. Beautiful contrast between the wild nature, the river, the tree, and the building. And I like the fact that the building is not refurbished. I like the patina of time, although maybe the building itself doesn't like it so much. Now, this is an important building by him, and he was 45 years old when he built it. Villa Molin in Mandria, near Padua. First, we see the drawings. And this is the building. And in an illustration from his time, I like the naivete of those illustrations, you know. Maybe it's just nostalgia from my part, but you see a building much closer to us, to the viewer, is so small compared to the building that was, you know, I mean, the door should be the same size, right? But this reminds me of the perspectival poetical licenses that the people in the Middle Ages took. For example, in the Middle Ages, if let's say a girl was dear to the, you know, to the illustrator, he would show her, you know, much bigger. And if he hated his neighbor, he would show his neighbor, even if his neighbor was in the foreground, very small. And in other words, the dimensioning was not objective, but was subjective. Here also, you know, it's impossible that a building for human beings, just like the other building, were for human beings to be so small in the foreground. But I actually think we could try again to have this kind of subjective representations, you know, to have the building in the back, you know, far in the far distance, to be much bigger than the building in the foreground, because in terms of what interests me, the building in the foreground is irrelevant. So I make it very small. Why do we need this excessive objectivity? I find it interesting like this. Anyway, this is my subversive side talking. Reflections are always nice. You know, a piece of water near the most banal building makes that banal building, by doubling it through its reflection, kind of interesting. So this is a, you know, a suggestion to students in particular. You know, it doesn't matter how you make the building. If you put some water near the building and you see the reflection, and it's not double the horror, but it's actually, you get a third reality, which could be interesting. Anyway, Villa Priuli from 1597. This one had an addition here on the right, I think, because the building, I think, ended here, and I saw drawing, it was extended, but it's kind of interesting, this asymmetrical building that you get from a symmetrical one by extension. So this part, I think, initially the building ended here, so they added, you know, this part. This is another interesting idea for when you do a project. You know, you could, for clarity of thought, you make something symmetrical and central, and then, you know, you extend it in one sense, in one direction, and you get something deformed, you know, like deviant architecture. You see it here. And you can see that there was a change here, because initially the building would end here, like this. But this part was added for some reason. Anyway, refurbished, and the announcement for the tourists, for the cultural tourists. and some drawings. You see in the drawing that it was perfectly symmetrical. It didn't have that addition on one side. Yeah, that's how the building was initially. Villa Godi, Vicenza. I think even Adolf Loos would have liked this building. Palazzo del Bo, Padua. Now I couldn't find the facade. I don't know if this is the facade towards the courtyard or the one towards the street. I couldn't find pictures with the other elevations or facades of the building. San Giacomo de Rialto in Venice. He did the altar together with this person, Girolamo Campagna, Girolamo Campagna. And San Lazzaro dei Mendicanti Church and Hospital in Venice. Interesting, this conjunction between a church and the hospital. And it's a good building in Venice. I visited Venice a few times, but I didn't see this building. It was finished after his death. Sorry, the picture is not very clear, but it has a well-proportioned facade. I think it's well done. Now, he did even a cathedral in Salzburg, in Austria, but was completed by someone else, Santino Solari. He did a project from 1604 to 1612, and it was built between 1614 and 1628. Now, I'm sure there were changes here. You can see that there is a local kind of aesthetics at work here. It's not really Italian, but apparently he did a project for this cathedral and it was built according to his plans. But I'm absolutely sure there were changes, even more so considering that he was not alive any longer. An impressive building. He worked on the sacristy door, but I couldn't find it. So we arrive at Villa Duodo, and 6 chapels for Via Romana. I couldn't find pictures. I'm sorry. And now we arrive at a very well-known building by Palladio, San Giorgio Maggiore, which only now I learned that actually he completed the facade, more than 25 years after Palladio died. So Palladio died in 1580, and between 1607 and 1611, for 4 years, Scamozzi worked on this famous work by Palladio in Venice. So apparently the facade, well, was based on the drawings, the plans, the elevations drawn by Palladio, but probably he had a creative role as well. So this is a facade that belongs to a building by Palladio, but considering that Palladio died 25 years before this facade was completed, I imagine Scamozzi had a role, a creative role in it as well. And it's impossible to miss this building if you visit Venice. obviously he was highly considered if he was given such commissions, to complete some important works by Palladio. Not far from it to the right is Il Redentore, also by Palladio. And across the water towards us is a building that was remodeled by Tadao Ando, the only one where Tadao Ando worked on in Venice. A large intervention inside a structure that existed. Unfortunately, kind of expensive to get in. I know when I arrived there with the students, we had second thoughts. Expensive tickets because you have to pay for the fact that Tadao Ando designed it. But one day maybe we should save some money and go and see it. Anyway, Villa Cornaro al Paradiso in Venice, the twin pavilions, but this one also I couldn't find the pavilions. Domenico Trevisan Villa from 1609, also I couldn't find, and I'm sorry, he built many, but I couldn't find pictures of everything. This is a palace, and I think soon I will end this presentation. Here also the information was confusing because there are two buildings, is this one and the one to the right. And on the web, I found information that on one hand that this one was done by Sansovino, on the other that the one on the right was done by Sansovino. So I don't know. It's hard for me to believe that he did both. I'm inclined to think that he designed and built the one on the left, not the one on the right. But as I said, on the web, there are conflicting informations. Some say that the one on the right is by Sansovino, by Scamozzi. Others say that the one on the left is by Scamozzi. So who knows? I'm tempted to think that this was by Scamozzi. So of the two, the one on the left, which is this one. And another villa. But here also the problem is because the habit of the time is to name a building using the name of the client, of the beneficiary, of the inhabitant. And if that inhabitant was affluent enough and rich enough to build several buildings, then you see let's say 3 buildings with the same name in different locations, and you don't know, if they were built by the same architect or some other architect because they have the same name, because the client was the same, but he built several buildings. So we need a specialist in Scamozzi in this case to bring some light on the matter. Another palazzo, the east wing, but it was demolished in 1659 and rebuilt in 1660. Is this one? I think this is the last work that I show. Is on Grand Canal. Is a prestigious location in Venice, at least in terms of the water that flows the canal that is in front of it. Seems to be different from the other buildings by him, but anyway, from what I understood, somebody told us here, these meetings, Zoom meetings, that in Venice, this was the habit. All the buildings were kind of almost identical, just the facade was done differently, and maybe this is the truth. Something will happen with tourism because of this pandemic. I mean, even this year, there was supposed to be a biennial in architecture. Well, I don't think it will happen. And you can see here actually that the facade is the facade, and then the rest of the building is whatever behind it. The facade is a mask. It could have been done in many other ways. That's all. Well, I thank you that you were patient with me, and there are still 6 people here. So we did it. We paid homage to Scamozzi. I didn't know myself a lot about Scamozzi, but today I know a little more about him. And I invite you tomorrow, if you have nothing else to do, I will pay homage to a very important Austrian architect who built a secession building in Vienna. And not only that, I'm talking about Joseph Maria Olbrich, quite an important architect and very talented. Unfortunately, he died young. I think he was 41 when he died. And I will talk also, I will present on the occasion of talking about Maria Olbrich, I will also talk about Joseph Hoffman and maybe a few other members of the secessionist movement, because I think the Austrian secessionist movement is very inspiring. For me, it continues to be inspiring, very much so, starting with the name itself, secession, which means to break away from. And I think we need a secession. I know that what I say now is probably in contradiction, appears to be in contradiction with what Alexandra said yesterday, that we should unite ourselves. Yes, we should unite ourselves, just as the secessionists unite themselves. They created a group that was against the commercialization of art, and they wanted to fight for intellectual integrity and for creativity that was genuine. And in that sense, I think we need a secessionist movement today as well, to say no to values we don't believe in. And that identity, that group identity that the Austrians had when the secessionist movement happened in Vienna, inspires us and inspires me. The very wording that is inscribed on the secessionist building in Vienna, it's in German, but in translation is something like this: to each time its art, and to each art its freedom. Beautiful. In other words, let's make an art that belongs to our time, and let's give art its freedom. And for this, we have to fight, because society is not going to give us the freedom that we need. And society will even resist an art that represents it, because society is blind most of the time, doesn't want truth. So then we need a secessionist. So let's start tomorrow, by the way of Maria Olbrich, our own secessionist movement. Please think about a way, even a logo, maybe one of you will design a logo for the new secessionist movement of the 2020, when we separate ourselves from whatever we are against, and you know, at the grassroots level, we start another secessionist movement. What do you think about